Welcome to this Excella University video on the topic of record search basics. My name is Thomas Strauss and I will cover the following. First, we'll take a look at search navigation. Then we'll jump into common search fields and several search examples. Let's get started. As we take a look at this record search tool, you're probably going to notice there are some shared feature experiences across the various search tools throughout the Civic platform, but there's also some differences, some distinctions, and so it's good to understand what those are as we look at, in particular, the record search tool, which is of course found in the record space. So I've navigated to my record space, and right in the toolbar there is a search button. So as far as basic navigation goes, you'll find the record search on the record space, and when you click on that button, it will open up your search form. Now, this particular search form can be customized per module or group based on what your business needs are, and your system administrator has that ability to customize this page. So what I'm displaying here is likely different than the layout and even the fields that are being used. So just be aware of that yours may look a little different. In terms of a basic search, before we get into the common search fields, I want to focus more on the navigation and the buttons that you see. So right at the top is a submit button, which after entering one or more criteria, you can use that to execute the search. In this case, I'm going to do a simple example. I'm going to choose from the group drop-down and choose building and hit submit, which is going to give me a list of all the building records. So I click on submit, and there's a list of building records. Now, the refined search is now replacing the search button. So I no longer have a search button, it says refined search. So if I were to click on this, I can navigate back to my search form and change criteria, add criteria as needed. And here are the results that were generated. So I will now click on Refine Search. Now at any time when you're on the search form, you'll also notice that there's a button at the top in the toolbar that says Cancel. And that is kind of like your back button. So if I click cancel, it takes me back to my results, and I have the refine search button still showing. If I click on refine search, it takes me back to my form. So cancel will take you back to the previous page. Right next to cancel is clear search. And it's important to note that when you use the refine search button, it does not clear the form from your prior criteria that were used. So for example, I chose the group building, that still shows there. If I want to add additional criteria to the one that was used previously, I can do that and simply add additional criteria and click submit again. If what I want to do is actually create a new set of criteria, then it would be appropriate to use the clear search button. And you can see that that cleared my criteria of building. That's gone, and I can now enter new criteria. Now, if I were to conduct a search and I get my results as shown here, notice again you've got the refine search button. Sometimes users want to know, well, how do I clear this? How do I get this back to where it was? It just says search, and I'm back to my default list of records. Over on the right side of the page, you're going to notice there's a little refresh symbol in the corner just under where your initials will show. And if you click on that, it will refresh the page, return it to your default record list based on your default sorting. And you'll see that now you have the search button again. So from the perspective of navigation, those are the basics that you should know about. Next, we're going to talk about commonly used search fields for record search. On my record search form, I'm going to highlight some of the common fields that are used. Right at the top of the form, you can see that there is a field that says record type alias. This would be your agency or your business name for the record type, like something along the lines of, say, residential addition permit. You could use that to isolate just those types of records. There's also the record number field that you could put in part or all of the record number, and that could be alphanumeric characters. And you may know from the global search video that global search requires 3 alphanumeric characters. Here, that's not the case. As long as you have some criteria, at least one character. Record number, you could put that in here. You could also use global search for that. Just enter that number and that'll retrieve the record. But that can also be done here. You can also look up records based on the individual that they're assigned to. So you've got an assigned to department, assigned to, and you can choose a user. And that might be helpful in cases with, say, enforcement, where you have cases that are assigned to specific code officers. And so this is assignments at the record level, not at the workflow task level. Right below that, you can see another commonly used one would be incorporating record status into the search. And again, record status here is, if I cancel this search, the column that shows here on my record list status, this is my record status, and this is different than the workflow task status. So you could look up all the records with a certain status. Maybe that's something that you need for your job, although a lot of times those types of searches are captured as filters and easy to get to a set of records based on status. So back on the search form, right below status in the way that my form is organized, there is a date range, and some agencies have the date range set, both the from and the to, and a lot of times that will be for the last, say, 12 months or the last 24 months. And that's important because if your agency does have that default date range established, then when you conduct a search, you could enter correct criteria, such as you could put in a record number that's exactly as it should be, but if your date range covers the last 24 months that the records were created, and that was a record created 30 months ago, then even though the record ID is correct, it's not going to show. So it's important to keep that in mind. Sometimes that trips up users that are trying to find a record and forgetting that that is an important part of your search. So there's also address, very common fields that are used. You could put in your address number, street name, street type, and look up all the records that are associated with that address. You could do the same thing with parcel that's shown over on the left. You could put in a parcel number and find all the records associated with that parcel. That would be another common one. Of course, contact types are very common as well. Your contact types would all be displayed here. So I want to find all the records where the authorized agent is, and enter a first and last name. And so that would be another way to look up records. Down below that, you have some fields there related to workflow. You could choose a current workflow task, and a current workflow status could be used as well. And then underneath that, you have some custom field labels and values, custom list label and value. Those are covered in another video that details some advanced features such as a phonetic search, wildcard searches, looking up records by custom fields. And so before we take a look at some examples of these common fields used to look up records, I want to point out that when you have more than one field utilized in your search, that's considered an advanced search. And the Civic platform, when you have 2 or more fields, uses the AND to look up those records. So it's looking for both of those criteria. So it's this criteria and that criteria, and it will look for records that match on both of those. There is a scenario where if you've got record detail criteria that you're using coupled with custom address parcel owner fields, where the Civic platform would use both and or. So it would look up records that match on both, or on either one. So keep that in mind. The general rule is the Civic platform uses and. So it would be looking for matches on both or on multiple criteria if you have more than two. So keep that in mind. Let's take a look at some examples of these searches. The first example I'm going to show you is using the record type alias combined with a contact. So first I'll enter the record type alias, and then down at the bottom of my page I'll go to my contact type, let's say applicant, and I'll use, for the last name, I'll use my own last name for this lookup. So I have a combination here of contact type and record type alias. I'll submit that, and I get two records. Both are in fact residential edition permit types. And if I open up one of these, I can see right in the quick access ribbon at the top, I can see that my name is showing as the contact. So that is an example of a lookup using two criteria, and the system looks for both of those criteria and finds two matches. So now I'll use the refined search, go back to my search form, and I will clear that search so we can do another. Looking up a record by record number is pretty straightforward. You could also look up by status. So I could use any of these statuses here to look up the record. I am going to do an example using address. So first I'll put in the address. And submit that. And I get several records that are returned at that particular address. So I put in 711 Park Avenue, and you can see that the address is captured in the application name. So all four of these records tied to that particular address. Another search that could be done would be using the parcel number. So I'll put in a parcel number there, submit that, and that returns three records. So you can see that any of these criteria could be used alone or combined to create a more robust search. And that takes us down to workflow, where you could look up a record based on workflow task, which again is different from the record task. So if the current task is application submittal, I could even define that a little further with the specific current workflow task, or just the current task as opposed to combining that with the status. And so I get one record returned where the workflow task is currently application submittal. So those are some examples, and that's it for the common search examples. There are other examples that are shown in another video on the more advanced features. In this video, I showed you some basic information about record search and navigation, reviewed some common search fields, and showed you several search examples. Be sure to check out the record search features video, which covers more advanced options for record search. Thanks for watching.